Dudley Do Right, are you doing with that other woman? I thought you always did right.
I was doing right, Nell.
Why was this one cartoon banned for 44 years? The answer lies in a controversial episode of Dudley Do Right that disappeared from public view for over 4 decades. Not even for a decade. This episode was completely wiped off the airwaves and buried in the animation vaults for 44 whole years. That's almost half a century of silence. No reruns, no VHS releases, not even a whisper. But what was the reason behind it? Don't even think about clicking away. You're about to find out. Keep watching till the end to find out. Meet Dudley Do Right. When people talk about animated characters that left a lasting impression, not just because they were funny, but because they poked fun at an entire genre, Dudley Do Right tends to pop up more often than you might think. His name alone seems to say it all, doesn't it? A guy who's always trying to do right, even when he doesn't really know what he's doing. He wasn't created to be the sharpest Mountie on the block, and frankly, that's part of what made him so unforgettable. Dudley Do Right was purposefully built as a satire, a loving parody of the stiff, overly noble heroes from early cinema who always saved the day with a furrowed brow and a puffed-up chest. And it's this exact over-the-top heroism flipped on its head that made Dudley such a gem. He first galloped onto the scene in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, which was already known for its smart, satirical take on pop culture and politics. And Dudley wasn't just a throwaway sketch, he became such a standout that ABC gave him his own half-hour animated series in the late 1960s. Now, why would a character like this, who by all means should have been forgotten because he barely knew which way to ride a horse, end up front and center? Well, the answer lies in just how cleverly he was crafted. What could possibly be so shocking in a cartoon that it got pulled off the air for 44 whole years? Was it a sneaky joke? A hidden message? Or something way deeper? You won't believe what was slipped past the censors, and when you find out why it was banned, you'll never look at old cartoons the same again. Stick around, because the real reason is hiding in plain sight. The creators behind Dudley Do Right weren't just writing cartoons for the sake of laughs. They were pulling directly from the DNA of early 20th century silent films. Think melodramas filled with overly dramatic expressions, slow chases, and women tied to railroad tracks. They even paid specific homage to O'Malley of the Mounted, a 1921 silent film starring William S. Hart. In fact, Dudley's very first appearance included silent film techniques like iris shots and intertitles. You know, those old-timey text cards between scenes. It was a direct wink to the audience saying, "We know what we're spoofing, and we're going all in." And if anyone ever questioned the musical tone of the show, they didn't have to look further than the rousing trumpet performance of the William Tell Overture that played during Dudley's frantic backward horse ride in the intro. That bit alone, a backwards riding Mountie charging into battle, summed up everything the character stood for, or stumbled through. But no satirical hero is complete without his classic villain and his eternally imperiled damsel, right? Dudley was joined by 2 equally caricatured companions, Snidely Whiplash and Nell Fenwick. Snidely, with his long, twisting mustache and top hat, looked like he walked straight out of a black and white stage play where the villain literally twirls his mustache while scheming. Nell, the daughter of Inspector Fenwick, was always the damsel in distress, though the show often flipped that trope on its head too. And the twist that had everyone chuckling? As the narrator famously said in Dudley's debut, Dudley loved Nell. Unfortunately, she loved his horse. Now, who saw that one coming? Dudley himself, though undeniably loyal and full of good intentions, was hilariously bad at his job. Not just bad, he was famously the worst trooper on the force. He was tall, with a hooked nose, and an awkward double chin, and despite looking like he might command authority, he was, well, kind of clueless. He always meant well, though. Always. That's what made him oddly charming. He was a textbook example of the idiot hero trope. A guy who sticks to the rules not because they make sense, but because they exist. He believed in the law, even if he had no idea how to actually enforce it. Ever met someone like that in real life? The kind of person who follows every rule in the handbook, even if it's clearly not helping anyone? That was Dudley, in spades. And yet, despite, or maybe because of, his incredible ineptitude, audiences loved him. There's just something about a character who never gives up. No. Matter how many times he gets it wrong. Kids loved the silly slapstick humor, the funny voices, and the bizarre situations. Adults, meanwhile, picked up on the layers of satire embedded in each episode. The parody wasn't just for laughs, it was a commentary on how predictable and over-the-top old-school heroes could be. Dudley was a lovable send-up of all of them, more honest than capable, more hopeful than heroic. And let's not forget the horse. His horse was, without a doubt, the brains of the operation. More often than not, it was this unsung equine hero who actually saved the day, while Dudley was blissfully unaware. Talk about the unsung sidekick. Isn't it funny how sometimes the quiet ones do all the heavy lifting? So why has Dudley Do Right stuck around in the cultural conversation, even decades after his show ended? Maybe it's because, deep down, he represents a kind of optimism that people secretly admire. He didn't need to be brilliant or skilled, he just had to keep trying, keep believing in doing good, even when things didn't go his way. Sure, he made a mess of things, but he never gave up. The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show's unique style. Back in the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons, there was one show that didn't quite play by the rules, one that didn't just aim to entertain kids with goofy gags and funny faces, but dared to poke fun at the world adults lived in too. That show was The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show. Now, if someone had sat down to watch it without knowing any better, they might have expected just another zany cartoon with a flying squirrel and a talking moose. But people soon realized this wasn't your run-of-the-mill kiddie fare. According to those who grew up with it, or maybe even snuck a few episodes as adults, this show, created by J. Ward Productions, was a clever, often satirical gem wrapped in bright colors and slapstick, always winking at the audience just enough to say, "We know what we're doing." So what made it stand out so boldly in a sea of cartoons? And how did it stir enough controversy to actually have an episode banned for over 4 decades? For starters, the show didn't follow the traditional storytelling playbook. It didn't neatly wrap up its plots in each episode like most cartoons at the time. Instead, it borrowed a page from old serial radio shows and early film chapters. Yes, those ones that ended with someone dangling from a cliff or tied to train tracks. The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show used this cliffhanger format for its main stories, where every 4 to 5 minute installment would end in suspense, daring you to tune in next time. That meant that watching one episode was never enough. You had to keep coming back to see what nonsense Rocky and Bullwinkle would stumble into next. And they always stumbled into something. But here's the fun part. Between these cliffhangers, the show would toss in entirely different segments, each with its own characters and sense of humor. So just when you were worried about Bullwinkle's latest scheme going haywire, you'd suddenly find yourself watching a posh dog and his pet boy travel through history, or a twisted version of a fairy tale that looked like it had been rewritten by someone who'd had one too many cups of coffee. People fondly remember segments like Peabody's Improbable History, which featured a genius dog teaching his adopted human son bizarre lessons from the past, or Fractured Fairy Tales, which took well-known childhood stories and turned them completely upside down, often to hilarious and oddly insightful effect. Then there was Aesop and Son, a winking update of fables with quirky morals that made you question whether you were learning a lesson or just being messed with. Bullwinkle's Corner let the moose recite poetry in the most gloriously wrong way possible, while Mr. Know-It-All featured Bullwinkle dishing out hilariously unqualified advice on everything from plumbing to love. And let's not forget Dudley Do Right, a Canadian Mountie in a silent film-style parody that made you laugh and cringe at how over-the-top yet oddly familiar it all felt. This patchwork format meant that no two moments in an episode felt the same, and that unpredictability was half the fun. The writers seemed to revel in jumping between styles, genres, and tones. One minute it was absurd comedy, the next it was biting satire. But what really stood out, what people still talk about today, was how the show managed to sneak in layers of meaning beneath the jokes. It was like a Trojan horse, cartoons on the outside, razor-sharp commentary on the inside. While the kids watched for the funny voices and visual gags, the adults in the room were catching the double meanings. The dialogue was packed with wordplay, puns, and subtle literary references that most kids wouldn't catch, though they might remember them later with a chuckle once they grew up. The villains, Boris and Natasha, weren't just cartoonish goofballs. They were thinly veiled jabs at Cold War-era Russian spies. Their bumbling antics might have gotten laughs, but for older viewers, they mirrored the paranoia and political climate of the time. And then there was the fourth wall breaking. Characters didn't just exist in their little animated world. They spoke directly to the audience, cracked jokes about the scriptwriters, and sometimes even complained about the commercials. It was meta before meta was even a thing. That kind of humor required a level of self-awareness that most cartoons wouldn't dare touch. And it worked. But as with anything that pokes fun at powerful systems or widely accepted messages, it didn't come without backlash. Now, here's where things get especially interesting, and, for some, a little shocking. The show's boldness in parody didn't stop at governments or fairy tales. It went after public service campaigns, too. And one of its most infamous moments came in the form of a now legendary episode that featured Stokey the bear. Sound familiar? That's because it was a cheeky parody of Smokey Bear, the beloved mascot of the U.S. Forest Service, who reminded children, only you can prevent forest fires. But in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show's version, the well-meaning bear accidentally sets a forest ablaze and then gets hypnotized into committing arson. That's right, arson. Even though it was clearly intended as satire, many officials at the time weren't laughing. The U.S. Forest Service reportedly found the episode dangerously misleading, especially for young viewers who might not understand the joke. So what did they do? They made sure that episode never aired again. And just like that, Stokey the bear was pulled from circulation and essentially vanished for 44 years. Some people who worked on the show later said that they were shocked by the reaction. To them, it was just another tongue-in-cheek jab at authority, done in the same spirit as all their other segments. But the government clearly saw things differently. Isn't it fascinating how a simple cartoon can suddenly become a battleground over messaging and public trust? The controversy around the banned episode highlighted just how effective the Rocky and Bullwinkle show had become at challenging the status quo, even if it didn't always mean to. It also proved that the show's brand of satire wasn't just clever, it was powerful. So, when people talk about the Rocky and Bullwinkle show today, they're not just talking about a nostalgic cartoon with silly characters and catchy theme songs. They're talking about a series that redefined what animation could do. One that balanced zany antics with cultural critique. One that dared to say what others wouldn't, even if it sometimes got into trouble for it. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't safe. But that's exactly why it mattered. The combination of segmented storytelling, clever double-layered humor, and bold parody created a format that was completely unique at the time and remains influential even now. And in an age where most shows play it safe, Rocky and Bullwinkle's willingness to take risks, both comedic and cultural, still feels remarkably fresh. So next time someone says cartoons are just for kids, maybe remind them of the show that dared to turn a fire safety bear into a hypnotized fire starter, and got banned for 4 decades because of it. Think that's wild? Oh, we're just getting started. Stick around, because what really happened in this buried gem might just change the way you look at Saturday morning cartoons forever. The banned episode. What happened in Stokey the Bear? When Stokey the Bear aired in 1961 as a segment of the Dudley Do Right cartoon series, nobody could have predicted the kind of reaction it would spark, nor that it would vanish from TV screens for the next 44 years. But that's exactly what happened. Just one broadcast, and then, poof, it was gone, tucked away like some forbidden relic too hot for daytime television. So, what was it about this seemingly innocent animated segment that caused such an uproar? Why would a short cartoon, tucked between silly jokes and exaggerated voices, be deemed too controversial for generations to see? The answer lies in a surprisingly sharp and mischievous jab at one of America's most trusted public service mascots, Smokey Bear. The story starts out in typical Dudley Do Right fashion, silly, slapstick, and with that unique brand of dry wit that often went over kids' heads but had adults chuckling in the background. In the episode, a group of lumberjacks stationed at Mount Up are horrified when the entire forest suddenly bursts into flames. We're not talking a few campfires getting out of control here. We're talking full-blown wildfire chaos. The entire mountain swallowed by fire. And then comes the jaw-dropping twist. The culprit behind this fiery madness is none other than Stokey the Bear. Who is he? Well, he's a 700-pound, cinnamon-colored bear dressed in a Mountie hat, who, up until recently, was a champion of fire prevention. But thanks to Snidely Whiplash, Dudley's ever-present villain, Stokey has been hypnotized into flipping sides. With the simple command, "Look into my eye, bear. Now go light a fire somewhere," Snidely turns a forest, protecting hero into a gleeful pyromaniac. As Stokey lights up every tree in his path, Dudley takes up the chase. He follows the trail of scorched earth all the way into Quebec, eventually tracking the bear to a firehouse. In one of the episode's most absurd yet hilarious moments, Dudley walks into a room full of firemen and doesn't even clock the giant furry bear in the middle of the squad. His only observation? One of them didn't shave this morning. That's classic Dudley. Brave, but not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. Things escalate quickly as the firehouse itself catches fire. Yes, really. And Dudley finally spots Stokey roasting marshmallows over the flames like it's some cozy campfire outing. He pursues him up onto a burning rooftop, rescues him mid-fall, and in an effort to reform the misled bear, decides to take him far away from the forests, to Chicago. Because what could possibly go wrong in a densely packed city, right? Well, here's where things really pushed the envelope. Dudley's bright idea to take Stokey to Chicago ends, predictably, in disaster. Another fire breaks out, and as the flames rage, Dudley turns to Mrs. O'Leary and cheekily says, "Remember, we'll blame it all on the cow." It's a punchline dripping in dark humor, referencing the infamous Great Chicago Fire of 1871, a real event that destroyed over 3 square miles of the city and left more than 100,000 people homeless. At the time, urban legend held that a cow kicked over a lantern in Mrs. O'Leary's barn, sparking the catastrophe. So to have Dudley and Stokey, in cartoon form, suggest they'll pin this latest blaze on the same mythical cow. That was a line too far for some. And what made it even more biting was how the satire was delivered. Stokey doesn't light fires with any sense of malice. He does it with a big, dumb grin, like he's playing a game. The contrast between his cheerful demeanor and the literal destruction around him wasn't just funny. It was deeply unsettling in a way that made viewers pause. Was this cartoon just being cheeky? Or was it sending a bigger message about how even the most well-meaning messages can be manipulated or misunderstood? And if so, what were kids supposed to take away from that? At the time, satire like this wasn't as widely embraced in children's programming as it might be today. Sure, cartoons often included jokes for the adults watching along, but skewering a government-endorsed mascot was bold, maybe even reckless. The U.S. Forest Service wasn't amused, that's for sure. And though there's no public record of an official ban, it's widely believed that pressure, whether subtle or direct, was applied to ensure this episode didn't air again. And it didn't. Not for 44 years. It became one of those whispered about lost episodes that people remembered seeing but could never find again. The kind of thing that, in the age of YouTube and nostalgia blogs, only gained more mystique with time. When Stokey the Bear finally resurfaced decades later, viewers could finally watch it with fresh eyes and a bit of historical context. It's easy now to see the humor and appreciate the cleverness behind the parody. But it's also easy to see why it ruffled feathers. It wasn't just poking fun at a bear in a hat. It was poking fun at an entire public information system. It reminded people that even the most sacred mascots are fair game when satire is involved. So why was it so controversial that it practically vanished from history? Oh, you'll want to stay glued for this, because the real reason this one cartoon got banned will absolutely shock you. Why was this one cartoon banned for 44 years? For those who grew up during the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons, or simply stumbled upon curious relics of animation history, there's one question that continues to pop up like a long-lost puzzle piece. Whatever happened to that strange old cartoon with Stokey the Bear? Why did it disappear from the airwaves for nearly 44 years, almost like it had been erased from existence? Well, the answer is surprisingly tangled in bureaucracy, legality, and a healthy dose of public image management. And when you peel back the layers, it reveals not just a quirky cartoon controversy, but a fascinating clash between creative expression and government control. So here's how it all unraveled. Back in 1959, a particular episode of the cartoon The Huckleberry Hound Show aired an innocent-looking segment featuring a character called Stokey the Bear. He bore a very strong resemblance to Smokey Bear, the famous forest fire prevention mascot we all know, hat, voice, catchphrases, and all. But in a plot twist that would make anyone's jaw drop, Stokey got hypnotized by a villain to start wildfires, the very thing Smokey was created to warn against. At first glance, it may have seemed like nothing more than a bit of satirical storytelling or classic cartoon exaggeration. But not everyone was laughing. Least of all, the United States Forest Service. Not long after the episode aired, the Forest Service responded with swift, firm action. They filed a formal protest, arguing that the cartoon completely undermined everything they had spent years carefully building through Smokey's campaigns. After all, Smokey wasn't just a cartoon character, he was a symbol, a serious one. To the Forest Service, watching their beloved fire safety mascot light a match on TV, even in parody, was akin to watching Superman rob a bank. It sent the wrong message, especially to kids. Wasn't Smokey supposed to stand for responsibility, prevention, and protection of America's natural lands? Reportedly, the backlash was so strong that the studio behind the cartoon was ordered to pull the episode from circulation. In fact, it's been said that all prints of the cartoon were destroyed, wiped from existence to prevent further damage to Smokey's public image. But, as with all good mysteries, at least one copy survived, lying dormant for decades before being rediscovered by curious animation historians. Still, for nearly half a century, the episode remained completely out of reach for the public. Why was that? Could it really have been that offensive? Well, yes, and it had a lot to do with legal protections. Smokey Bear isn't just a friendly face with a catchy slogan. His likeness and name are protected by federal law. That's right, he's one of the very few advertising mascots with congressional protection. Introduced during World War II and used to raise awareness about wildfires, Smokey's image is owned and managed by the federal government, specifically the Forest Service. And they don't play around with unauthorized use. Since 1974, it's actually been a criminal offense to use Smokey Bear's name or image in a way that isn't officially sanctioned. Can you imagine facing jail time over a cartoon bear? Up to 6 months behind bars, in fact. That's how seriously they took it. The deeper concern, however, wasn't just about legal rights or image control. It had to do with the power of media, especially media aimed at kids. Officials at the time genuinely feared that children, who were the primary target of Smokey's fire prevention message, would get confused. What if, after watching the cartoon, kids started to associate Smokey, or a version of him, with the act of starting fires? Couldn't that damage years of public education work? Remember, Smokey's campaign had been remarkably successful, helping to reduce the number of wildfires dramatically. Why risk unraveling that progress with one silly cartoon gag? Some might argue the government overreacted, that viewers could tell the difference between parody and reality. But the Forest Service wasn't willing to take that chance. To them, it wasn't just about cartoon jokes, it was about acres of forest, lives and homes saved over the years, thanks to a bear in a ranger hat reminding people to be careful. So they cracked down, hard. From controversy to cult classic. Back in the early 1960s, something strange happened in the world of cartoons, something that would remain a mystery for more than 4 decades. It all centered around a single episode of the beloved animated series The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show, specifically one of its Dudley Do Right segments titled Stokey the Bear. Now, at first glance, it may have seemed like just another quirky adventure filled with the show's trademark puns and satire. But apparently, one powerful organization didn't find it very funny. That group? The United States Forest Service. According to multiple reports from the time, the Forest Service wasn't just mildly annoyed, they were furious. Officials from the department didn't just fire off a letter of complaint or make a phone call. No, they showed up at J. Ward Productions, the studio responsible for the show, wearing their official uniforms. That's right, full government regalia. They wanted to make it absolutely clear that they disapproved of how their iconic character Smokey Bear, thinly disguised in the episode as Stokey, was being portrayed. Could a cartoon bear really provoke that kind of response? Apparently, yes. The creators, perhaps stunned by the dramatic protest, didn't argue. the episode was swiftly yanked from syndication. Just like that, it vanished. While the rest of the Dudley Do Right episodes continued to air for years, charming children and tickling adults with their absurdity, Stokey the Bear was wiped clean from the rotation. It didn't just stop airing on TV. When VHS tapes and, later, DVDs of the show were released, this one episode was always suspiciously absent. It was as if it had never existed. But fans remembered. Over time, it became a sort of holy grail among animation enthusiasts, a lost episode whispered about on internet forums and among collectors, with many wondering what could have been so bad about it that it had to be locked away for 44 years. This long exile continued quietly until 2005, when something unexpected happened. Sony Wonder and Classic Media decided it was time to dust off the vault and give the people what they'd been curious about for so long. For the first time since its disappearance, Stokey the Bear was officially released on home video. For those who had grown up hearing myths about this forbidden cartoon, it was surreal to finally see it with their own eyes. And when they did, many scratched their heads. Yes, the satire was clear. Yes, it poked fun at Smokey's wholesome image. But was it really worth all that fuss? Did it truly warrant nearly half a century of censorship? That's a question viewers still debate. Today, finding the episode isn't hard. In fact, you can search for it on YouTube or the Internet Archive and watch it freely. No passwords or bootleg copies required. It's ironic, isn't it? After being locked up for so long, Stokey the Bear is now more accessible than ever. In some ways, its once banned status has only added to its charm. For historians and die-hard fans of Rocky and Bullwinkle, the episode is a fascinating relic, a symbol of a time when a cartoon could stir up serious governmental heat. And the show itself? It never lost its edge. That blend of clever writing, biting satire, and unapologetic absurdity has kept it alive in the hearts of fans. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.